And we're here. We're doing it. So, Nathan, very excited to be doing this podcast together. I think maybe we can give a little context on how this started for anybody who's joining for this inaugural episode. So, Nathan and I are both online writers. I've been writing online I've been doing it for 10 plus years. You've been doing it since
3 years? 3 years?
Is that it?
Yeah.
Feels like you've been doing it longer.
No.
It's not fair that your email list is bigger than mine.
Well, I actively try to grow it. You don't really.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, trying makes a difference.
It does.
It does. But we've been writing together now for a year and a half, I think.
Yeah,
is that
roughly.
right?
That sounds right. You were most of the way through Crypto Confidential. You had drafts and everything already done. So
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
I think it was April, May, June of 2023.
Yes.
Right? I think that's right.
Yes.
So yeah, a year and a half. That's crazy. But writing together for over a year and a half now, and basically getting together once a week and writing together, obviously, but also talking about what we're learning, giving each other bits of our books and workshopping them, sharing podcasts we're listening to, sharing things we're reading, and realized along the way just how little good information there is out there for anybody else who's on this path trying to become a full-time author, trying to write and sell books in this very professional, very focused way. And we started talking about what we were learning and doing with our friends and other people in the writing world, and they seemed interested in it. And so this seemed like the natural extension to create a podcast where we could actually go deeper on some of these things we're learning each week, both from other people's work and from our own work, share that progress so that anybody else out there who wants to write a book or who is just curious about how the industry works has a great place to learn about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Publishing, to me at least, is this murky world that is very difficult to understand.
Yeah.
So just trying to peel back the layers on that, just what I'm learning, what Nat's learning, and share that with everybody as we kind of fiddle about trying to build careers and
figure this out together. Yeah. The thing that's interesting to me about publishing too is coming from the online writing, online entrepreneur world, where it's pretty normal to build in public, share how things are going, even from the early days. You don't see that much of that in publishing. Even people who are moderately successful will often not share their numbers, not share their proposals, not share how they got their book deals. It's all kept very close to the chest, not share number of books sold. You only get those insights when somebody's already sold a few million copies or is already pretty far down the path. And that's kind of a shame. It would be nice to get more insight into those earlier steps along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. The one place that I found that's great that could shout out right here is the Publishing Rodeo podcast. They've been excellent. I found their stuff to be just very insightful, and they've done a great job at both the two hosts as well as getting guests to really share more specifics around what they enjoy about the industry, what they don't, what their numbers look like, what their numbers don't look like. And that's definitely, at least for me, inspiration to start this and do it from our direction. I've never published a book, but I have this thing that's getting really freaking close.
So close.
To being, I think, pretty good and just getting that out into the world. You have published a book, and now you're kind of straddling the line between nonfiction and fiction and wanting to do both. That's kind of rare.
Yeah, yeah. And to second what you said about Publishing Rodeo, when I was first starting to get interested in the fiction side of things, I remember I asked you, do you have any good podcasts that I can listen to try to understand this world? And we both started looking, and there were shockingly few that really went deep on that part of the process. There are a lot of book fan podcasts,
reviews, things of that nature, and that are really good.
Yeah, and
but
they're great.
It addresses a different market.
Exactly. Yeah, if you want to be professional writer, professional author, write great books, get them published, that's what we're trying to figure out here with all of you. So maybe we can talk a little bit about who we are, what we're working on, where we are in the book process, if you want to get us started.
Sure. to understand me, you have to start 2019, 2020, wrote my first book at the tail end of college, queried that thing like crazy to 95, 100 agents, something like that. I have a big Excel list, and my engineering self got really dorky with the Excel, and I can make a template and share that with everybody. It was helpful to have like a legit tracker for it because it can get out of hand real quick. But those queries got like 70 something rejections, another 20, 30 no replies. Really not a fun experience. And if you've gone through querying like that, you'll probably understand what I mean. Some of you may have had a better experience. I hope you did. But that was, it's brutal to go through that. And I actually, like, looking back at that book, I think the story is pretty good. The writing can be better and everything, and become a better writer.
You told me the plot of it, and I got excited.
Yeah.
I still feel like there's something there.
I hope to get back to it at some point, because I spent a ton of time on that thing. And that's one of the hardest part, at least for me, about writing fiction, is you can spend 6, 9 months, a year and a half, maybe more, working on these things, and they'll just, nobody will ever see it. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah.
So, went through all that, kind of went away from writing books for a little bit. I was like, man, I don't know if it's worth the effort, and just found that I want to come back to it, and really rededicated to writing, not just online, but trying to write novels specifically. And they're super different skill sets. We've both talked about this.
Yeah.
Between writing online and writing novels, and I much prefer writing novels. So yeah, working on this one. I think it's pretty good.
Wait, can we pause there? Because I wanna hype up what you did after those rejections a little bit.
Sure.
Because you got those rejections, but then you started this newsletter and started writing about storytelling, and you've built a pretty massive audience off of that. It's like really cool.
Yeah, it's weird to think about, but I look at it as I'm trying to get better at the craft of storytelling, specifically writing also, and sharing what I learn along the way, whether it's from other people, whether it's from just picking apart great books or movies, or heck, recently I've been getting into like song lyrics. Cool. And there's some incredible songwriters out there, and I think there's a lot to learn from them. But sharing things like that, and it's hopefully long term it'll pay off with people who follow me there, buy books.
Yeah,
we'll see if it works. That's the theory. Theory.
It's certainly way better than trying to get into this with no audience.
Well, I tried to do that.
Yeah,
and it was brutal.
Well, and to your point about how challenging getting into the fiction world is, like having to write the whole book before even talking to an agent or potentially getting a deal.
Yeah,
that's wild.
It's very different than nonfiction.
Yeah.
So for fiction, you literally write the entire book, whether it's 60,000 words, 150, 250,000 words, edit it a bunch, and then you send it off to agents, and that's called the querying process. If you get an agent, then they'll basically reach out to publishing houses alongside you. That's for the traditional model, if you will. So if you're trying to get a deal with Penguin or somebody like that, that's the model you take. You can also go, I'm blanking on.
Indie? Hybrid?
Yeah.
Self-pub?
Self-pub. And there's a bunch of different ways to get into that as well. But I, at first really wanted to do traditional. So that's the route I tried to take.
Yeah. And I think we'll do a whole episode in the next few weeks on what that process was like for you, right? Especially since you're about to start going through it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
So do you want to share where you are with your book now?
Nat has read the first 3 acts. I owe him act 4. I've owed him that for like a week and a half.
I was going to text you this morning to badger you again.
Yeah.
I can badger him in person.
I'm bad about that. I'm slow. I hesitate to share any of my stuff until I think it's really good. I'm way too slow. I should be faster with it. It definitely slows me down.
We'll definitely do an episode on that too. Like when to get feedback on something, because that's such a tough like needle to thread timing wise. But yeah, I feel like to your point, it's probably better to err on the side of too early than too late, right?
Agree.
Like Eric Jorgensen from Scribe gave me this heuristic where he said he sends stuff to people when it feels 80% ready. And That's like not a bad mental model.
I do it when I'm at like 105%. So.
But you have the fourth act pretty much ready to go to share?
Yeah.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. Like right after this?
Don't put me on the spot.
No, it's okay. And then planning to start querying in like 2 weeks, a month?
Yeah, in November.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely have
We'll see what agents are open for querying and all that good stuff. That's a whole separate thing.
Yeah.
And how I'm trying to get warm intros instead of cold intros. Happy to go into all that we can do an episode on that too.
Totally. We definitely should. I'm really curious about that. I think other people will be too. My story, like Nathan said, I published a book earlier this year called Crypto Confidential, which is a narrative nonfiction story about working during the last cryptocurrency mania. I was working in crypto from 2021 to 2022 during that crazy mania, ended up getting a pretty interesting story out of it. And so I had a very different querying process where, for one, with nonfiction, you hardly have to write anything before you get the book deal, which is wild.
I'm a little jealous.
It is crazy. Like now trying to work in both worlds, the amount of effort on the front end you have to do for nonfiction versus fiction almost feels unfair in that, I had to do a pretty meaty proposal. It was like 50 pages, but most of that was marketing and most of that was audience size and all the people I could promote the book to initially to get early sales, and then a rough table of contents and a rough sample chapter. But once I had that, I got warm intros like we were talking about to a few agents, and we'll do an episode on what my process was like as well at some point. But got those intros. The fifth or so agent who I talked to was really interested.
Fifth agent.
I know. Yeah, it feels really like unfair talking about it this way. But
it's awesome.
But to your point about like the warm intros, right?
Yeah.
It's like thankfully, this again, it's like the benefit of working in the online world, building an audience and like having those connections. It's like if you know other people who have written books, it does make it a lot easier to get those intros to agents. So I think we'll do some episodes on like audience building and network building.
Yeah, your hit rate was always going to be way higher. Those are completely different things.
Yeah. And we've talked to other aspiring fiction authors trying to get those agent intros or trying to like get in front of an agent, and it's so hard if you don't have someone to vouch for you.
His agents receive hundreds of manuscripts and queries per week.
Yeah. And especially for a fiction agent, they have to read the whole book.
Or at
or
least
like,
you can
skim it a little bit.
You probably get a good idea pretty early on.
It's probably at least a 2 to 3 hour commitment though, if they're going to like do full due diligence on one.
Yeah.
And so that's on top of all their other work too.
What they do is within the query, you'll send the first page or so, let's call it. Some agents have different guidelines. Maybe it's first 5 pages, whatever. And then they have what's called a slush pile. And often the agent will have a helper who helps them go through the slush pile and will just highlight, hey, this is worth looking at.
Yeah.
That's kind of how they do. But sorry, continue
Your
on.
future is determined by a hungover intern at Penguin Random House.
Yeah. In the West Village.
Yeah, exactly. But then he reached out to publishers and got picked up by Portfolio, which is part of Penguin Random House. They were absolutely incredible to work with. I had an you hear a lot of horror stories of working with publishers from authors, and I didn't have any of that. It was an awesome experience. Loved them. And book came out earlier this year and have been working on the next things.
It's a really good book too.
Thank you. Yeah. Nathan was kind enough to read multiple early.
Yeah.
Or like
got a shout out in the
late
acknowledgments.
drafts. You're in the acknowledgments? Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Probably your first acknowledgments.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. I got my first one this year too. And it's like, oh, that feels really cool.
But we'll have to figure out how to parse out different episodes from your experience with Crypto Confidential.
Yeah.
The whole process. The whole process is probably too much for one episode.
Totally. We could do a fiction, getting a deal as a fiction author, getting a deal as a nonfiction author, prepping for launch. There's like a lot of really cool episodes we can pull out of all the stuff we've talked about so far. But and since that came out, obviously promoting that, talking about that, going on podcasts, I have my newsletter, social media, all of that, but really focused on the next books. Most eminent of which is this novel I've been working on since I turned in Crypto Confidential. So I finished Crypto Confidential in October of 23. turned it
A
in.
year ago.
Hmm?
Year ago.
Yeah, that's right. Almost exactly a year ago. Turned it in. Had some small edits from that, but it was sealed January 2nd. Then it didn't come out till July, right? So there's that long lag there. And from when I turned it in, I started working on Husk, the sci-fi novel. Got a first version of it to a point that I thought was decently good. Gave it to my agent. He said, I don't know that I can sell this.
Yeah.
More because of the world and the story than the actual writing quality.
I remember
thankfully.
you texted me and I was like, oh, shoot. I mean, it was a 85,000 word book.
No, dude, it was 120,000.
120. It was 120.
Yeah. So to this point of you can do an incredible amount of work
Yeah.
and then have to, I mean, yeah, I just like scrapped most of it. I'm reusing some of the characters and a lot of the themes in the world are the same for the book now. But
your agent's feedback, David
yeah.
was very interesting.
Oh, it was so helpful. Just fascinating.
What exactly did he say?
The overarching thing, which I hadn't even really thought about, but now is a really salient question in my mind, was that it's not enough for it to be an entertaining story with interesting characters and good writing. It also needs to present a world and a conflict and a situation that is familiar but novel enough to get a publisher's attention.
Mm-hmm.
And familiar but novel is like such a good way to put it. I think you've written about this before, like 2% or 5% or something like that.
Yeah, there's a Virgil Abloh thing. He applied it to design. You want it to be at least 3% different.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing that David said was I had two points of view, 2 plot lines, which like don't do 2 points of view for first novel, I think. That was
It's hard.
Yeah, I really like blew out the scope on that more than I needed to. And
It's not shocking knowing you.
I know. I mean, I made the same mistake with Crypto Confidential, right? It's like, let's not write a normal nonfiction book. Let's do narrative and let's try to explain this super technical thing along the way. It was way harder than I expected. But yeah, his thing was that the 2 main plot lines, one was a scientist trying to figure out how to transfer consciousness into a machine, and another was basically like world-ending plague. Those are both very familiar challenges, conflicts, not particularly novel. The combination of them was a little bit novel, but not novel enough to get a publisher's interest. But then the thing that he said that was really interesting was, where is this world going, right? What is this leading to? And I told him about the world that I was trying to build to by the end of the book. And he said, that's really interesting. Like, maybe just start there. which is where I had originally started.
Start at where at 124,000.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your beginning.
Yeah. Skip 50 to 100 years into the future. Start there. That's gonna be more interesting. And so yeah, shelved that and started this version. And he was right. It's way more interesting.
Yeah.
And you and a few other people who read drafts of the old one and drafts of the new one all said the same thing.
Yeah, you can tell just from the first maybe 10 pages.
Yeah.
It's not, the writing is very similar. It's the world that they're dropped into.
Yeah, it's just more interesting. So that was good advice. Painful. It's weird looking at like how many words I've written this year, because I track that very meticulously, and I'm at something like 290,000, but 150, 160,000 of that are just in a drawer.
Just living in your Doodle Drive.
Yeah, exactly. Like not really turned into anything. But good practice, good world building, definitely not a waste. So my plan right now, and I have some more fun news and announcements to share around this in the next few episodes, but plan is to get it ready to ship by January. So I'm in like sprint mode again and getting that done. And hopefully I'll have the full draft for you in 2 weeks.
Sweet.
Is the goal.
And when you say sprint mode again, maybe talk about the first sprint real quick.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We'll have to do an episode on this too. But after I got that feedback from my agent and was very sad about scrapping it, I think understandably.
For sure.
I said, okay, how fast can I write a new draft? And so I kind of mapped it out and I said, well, if I do 5,000 words per weekday plus 1,250 per weekend day, I can get a new 120,000 word draft done.
5,000 words a day is ridiculous.
It's insane. Yeah, I'd never done anything close to that. But I was like, if I clear my schedule and I use enough stimulants and everything, like maybe I can pull it off.
I showed up to a coffee shop that we work at, and Nat has like a cortado, a latte, and some kind of energy drink, as well as his like Zen pouch.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, are you okay?
So so funny. Yeah, you sat down. I had the coffee, the Celsius,
Yeah.
and the knickknacks, like all sitting together. And what did you say? You said something funny. You were like, "Oh, this is new."
Yeah, I haven't seen this before.
But yeah, got it done. Got the first draft, about 85,000 words done in 26 days. And so we'll definitely do an episode on that. And I mean, it's like it was a better first draft.
It's good. It is. It's interesting.
Yeah. And so now on the second one, I think it's going to be about 100, 105 when I send it to you. And I feel really good about it. I'm excited. So.
And the goal is end of year to have it pretty solid.
Yeah. The rest of the timeline I've set for myself is get this to you and a few other beta readers in 2 weeks. And then I'll start doing the edits that I already know about.
Sure.
As I get feedback from all of you, I'll start doing all of those edits. Goal would be to get another draft done for Thanksgiving break to give that to readers for that holiday. Hopefully get more feedback after Thanksgiving, and then December do a 5th draft, basically, with the goal to get it to people by Christmas holiday. And then hopefully people read over the Christmas holiday and can get it to a point where it's about ready to turn in for a like professional manuscript review the first week of January. Because I'll be able to do more edits after that, but then I'll definitely be at a point there where I'm willing to pay a professional to look at it or to send it to a big publisher in the hopes that they'll accept it. And I think that'll be, I think it's a doable timeline. It's aggressive, but we've talked about this. It's like you practice and you get better, you get a little faster, and really you learn how to optimize your editing flow, like what to edit and what to focus on.
This is something that I'm bad at because I will edit my prose until I'm like, oh, this is like reads really easily. It's really nice. Very little like mistakes or whatever. The sentences are all different, like structure wise, the paragraphs and everything too. And at some point, you can over edit. And the other thing for me that I think I do way too much of is I'll over edit all these scenes, and then 2 weeks later I'm like, well, I'm not sure I need that scene.
Yeah.
Or this scene would be different, but I need to make these other big structural changes that'll make the scene very different. So I spend way too much time on granular editing when I should be looking at like bigger picture story structure editing first, just to optimize time.
Yeah.
You're way better at that.
Well, I use this story a lot, which really clarified that decision for me, where when I wrote the first draft of Crypto Confidential, it was 105,000 words or something. And literally the first edit I did was deleting the first 30,000 words.
There you go.
Which is a lot of words.
Yeah.
And I had spent a good amount of time already pre-editing them as I was going and trying to tweak them and stuff. And then to get to the end and realize that I just needed to delete all of that, it was this really eye-opening experience of, oh, I shouldn't have edited any of it as I was going, because all that time was like kind of wasted. But it's hard to do. And like, to your credit, your prose has gotten like so strong from that exercise. It's like, I called this out in the last draft you gave me too, right? Where I texted you a few chapters in. I was like, dude, this is really good. Like, it's reading so nicely. Like it really works. I mean,
it works unless you have to delete all the words.
Well, yeah, that's the painful part.
Yeah.
I talked about this with our friend David Perel a little bit about how there's like your first draft sort of sets the floor and the ceiling on how good the book can be, in a sense of like, you can only edit so much. And like, sometimes you do just have to like delete stuff and start over. And like, I've really found that with my stuff too.
So how does it set the floor and how does it set the ceiling?
Well, so let's say you write a first draft of a book. It's not going to get any worse than that, right? I guess it could. It could. It definitely could.
I see your point though.
Yeah. But there's also going to be a ceiling because you can only do so much tweaking versus like deleting and recreating.
And your first draft of your draft of the original Husk kind of shows that, like, no matter how good the writing was, the story was always going to be better set a little bit in the future in that to come world, if you will.
Yeah. And there is like is the Stephen King line, right? You have to kill your darlings. You have to be willing to just delete tons of words to put better ones down.
And your characters.
And your characters. Yeah, that was the weird thing about shelving that draft, was basically just destroying 20 odd characters.
Is Lena just gone? Or is she in the...
No, Lena's in.
Okay.
She appears in Act 2.
Yeah.
So I kept Lena.
Long life.
Lena was a great character.
She was.
But like Tito's gone. There's like all these other people that we liked. But we'll talk about that in future episodes. So that's a little bit about us and what we're up to. Is there anything else that we should cover on that topic? I feel like we did.
No, our very loose structure idea for these episodes is big topic. What are we going to cover? So today's was more all over the place than usual, but we wanted to give people backgrounds on where we're at exactly, and how different our career paths until this point have been for writers, and to just share what we hope you get out of listening to this. But going forward, it'll be, one big idea. Let's say it's, okay, Nat's nonfiction book deal, that process of reaching out to the agent and going from agent to deal. Yeah. That could be one big idea for the whole episode. Or for me, maybe it's that querying process that I went through. I'll just, maybe bring the laptop, show everybody everything, the whole Excel sheet, everything. So that's the one big idea. And then we'll do, I think, like a writing or storytelling thing we've learned recently and what we're reading.
Yeah.
Wrap it up there. Keep these 30, 45 minutes.
Yeah. And so that'll definitely be the promise, is big focus. And then I like the writing things that we're learning, because I feel like every week we end up talking about some new thing we picked up, and then what we're reading. Yeah. So you want to jump into something you learned about writing recently, or editing, or...
The one that stands out for me recently, I've been working a lot on making my dialogue better. And because you just like try to write like people talk, and then it's, this is boring as hell. Like, I don't know why anybody would want to read this. And the tip that I forget exactly where I found it, but the tip that I found helpful to keep in mind is to make your dialogue just always an argument. Like, even if it's two good friends, we'd be arguing.
Yeah.
And
no, we wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. And that just puts so much more conflict right there, innately within the dialogue. If you view it that way, much more interesting. I found that it's actually less words and can lead to some compelling scenes that I didn't realize were there. So make dialogue an argument always.
Can you say more about the compelling scenes you didn't realize were there?
Yeah. So, for example, you have two friends chatting, and let's say through that act of creating an argument between them, you realize that one of them is jealous of the other. That can lead to something else. Whereas if it was just a back and forth conversation, and in real life, maybe that jealousy isn't actually brought up, it's just stuck in one of their heads or something, it doesn't really lead to anything. But in the story, you can just expound on that, whether it's right then or use that to foreshadow something later in the story. That's kind of the route that I've taken.
Yeah, I like that tip a lot. I think they said something similar in Conflict and Suspense.
That might have been where I read it.
Yeah, which is definitely one of the books that I feel like we're going to reference a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like our top three that we end up referencing are probably Conflict and Suspense, Fire and Fiction. What's the third? On Writing, Stephen King. You really like Swim in the Pond in the Rain, right?
George Saunders. Yeah. Really good. Anything from Brandon Sanderson's YouTube lecture series, also so excellent.
Yeah. We were actually talking about that this week a little bit. We'll come back to that and what we're reading recently. But writing tip one that comes to mind on the topic of dialogue that I love and that I always try to remember is that dialogue is really boring when people are standing still or when nothing else is going on. The like standing and talking, or especially like standing and talking about a plan or standing and talking about something that just happened, always feels so slow and dull.
Yeah.
And so whenever I feel like my dialogue is getting dull, I try to like find some way for them to be moving or doing something, even if it's doing the dishes or putting stuff in a car or just some kind of movement.
Yeah.
I think
movement goes a long way.
It goes a long way. And I think it probably helps too for the reader to imagine the dialogue more because they have a physical thing people are doing they can like tie the interaction to. Whereas it's probably harder to just imagine two people standing still talking. You'll notice it in movies too. Sometimes a movie feels a little slow when people are just standing still and talking. And I feel like it can help there a lot as well, but I'm not a screenwriter, so I don't really know. What about what you're reading recently that you're enjoying or not enjoying?
I did a big switch. So I was doing a lot of classics, specifically George Steinbeck, Grapes of Wrath, East of Eden, and then Isaac Asimov, The Foundation, I, Robot, all that good stuff. 'Cause I just think they're some of the best authors to come out of the last 150, 200 years. Big switch recently. So my wife has been trying to get me to read anything by Sarah J. Maas for years now, like 4 or 5 years at least. So I agreed. I was like, all right, pick one of her books. I'll read it. She got me Throne of Glass. I was like, all right, I'll sit down and read it. I wasn't super excited to read it. I was like, this romantic-y thing's not really for me. That series is excellent, turns out.
It's great.
Really enjoying it. Almost done with book 3. We'll probably read book 4.
Wow. Okay.
And it's very good. I see why they're so popular. They're hard to put down.
Yeah.
She's a really, really good writer and knows how to just like move the story along, but it doesn't feel like the plot is insanely fast or anything like that. But the pacing is excellent. Makes you, I look forward to reading it. So really good and really different than most things I read.
What do you think about her pacing is holding you in like that?
It's a good question because I think it's pacing both within an individual story and then within the whole series because the series does a really good job of gradually expanding with each book. So first book is set in one specific setting. It's in this castle. Second book expands. It's not just in the castle, but it's also within the city that the castle's in. Third book, okay, there's some scenes in the castle, some in the city, but mostly the main character is actually kind of abroad throughout the country or continent, whatever, and doing more things. So she's really good at expanding slowly. It almost never feels like the story contracts or gets smaller upon itself.
Cool.
And I think that just makes you want to keep reading.
Yeah. I think you've talked about that before, maybe on your newsletter, about the like slowly expanding world, like not overwhelming people with too big of a world at the start and then kind of like adding pieces as you go.
Yeah, I think it's something that I'm trying to do. We'll see.
I think you do a good job of that.
Works.
Pieces I've read.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you're thinking this will be a series, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing with fiction book deals too, right? Is that you'll often get a deal with the expectation that it becomes a series.
True.
Right? A 2 or 3 book deal.
You read the end of this, it's not a standalone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it have a similarly frustrating end to Will of the Many? Or is it fewer loose ends than that?
Definitely loose ends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Some pretty big loose ends.
Nice. I'm
Very
excited.
intentional, but
Excited to read it. Pierce Brown does a really good job of that with Red Rising.
yeah, I think it was end of book 2 where Darrow is like in a casket at the end of the book.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
But even just in the first act of the first book, right? It's like he's in the mine and then, he's above ground. He can see there's like more to Mars than like just the mine.
Yeah.
And then, it expands to the Institute, but they never really leave Mars in the first book.
True.
And then it expands to other planets. And then in the second trilogy, it expands to like
The Rim as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool, it makes it way more digestible.
It's another writing tip that I love is if you can make things visual, either like maps are great examples. You can use the map as a visual and just help your reader expand through there, or trying to travel through there, and they can literally see progress happening.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've mentioned that too with like the school setting, right? Schools is such a common setting in books because it's a familiar atmosphere to everyone.
It provides a structure. There's a start to the school year and an end to the school year. There's tests, whatever. It's that, what you talked about earlier, familiar but novel.
Yeah, yeah.
That structure is familiar, but you have to add something novel to it.
Especially in fantasy and sci-fi, where you're probably introducing magic systems or tech systems that people are going to have to do some work to understand. If they don't have to understand the structure of the setting
Yeah.
that makes their life quite a bit easier.
Great point.
Yeah. So I just finished Will of the Many. We were talking about that, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I mean, you had recommended it and a few other people recommended it, and just like fantastic. I flew through. It's the first book that I stayed up late to finish in a long time.
That's a massive compliment.
Which is a huge compliment. Yeah. Huge testament. And it was funny because we were talking about like little things in it that not like broke the immersion or that we didn't like, but I think it's little things we noticed now that we're so focused on these things. And I don't want to like spoil the book for anyone who hasn't read it, because I feel like it's still coming up.
Yeah.
It's still slightly on the earlier side. So I'll just pick
and
one.
It's the first in what will be a series.
I wonder how many books he's going to do.
Great question.
He could do a lot, because he keeps the world very small in the first book. You hear about a bigger world, but it really doesn't go much beyond Ulciscor's estate and the university.
Yeah.
So overly competent characters, I feel like, was one that we talked about a little bit, where it's like if the protagonist is good at too many things, you start to feel a little bit like, okay, what's the weakness here?
It's kind of Paul Atreides-esque, just good at everything.
Yeah.
But I think readers probably prefer that over somebody who sucks at everything.
Totally. Yeah. I guess Rowling did kind of a good job of that in her books by having the trio each have different weaknesses.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, especially in the movies, Harry is like not a very good wizard.
Yeah, he's good at one thing.
What is the one? Quidditch?
Okay, two things: Quidditch and Defense Against the Dark Arts.
Yeah,
that's about it.
Yeah. And then Hermione's like the super competent wizard.
Ron's just hilarious.
Yeah, and Ron's exactly the comedic relief sort of. But yeah, Will of the Many was awesome, and I also don't read a lot of fantasy, so it was nice to read a fantasy book like that felt heavier and more serious. 'Cause I think the last fantasy book that I read was Mistborn, which I also enjoyed, but it's definitely younger.
Yeah,
a little lighter.
I thought Will of the Many, James Islington, I believe is the author's name. He does a great job of like going big in moments.
Yeah,
I thought. What did you think?
No, I agree. The scale of some of the conflicts and some of the bigger action events and things that happen was very powerful, really big, and he does a good job of drawing something out almost to the point where you're bored. And then right when you start to be like, they've just been talking for too long, something really big happens. And it just pulls you right back in. And it's almost like it makes me think of like Dave Chappelle with his stand-up, where he'll kind of go down this path where it feels kind of like dark and not funny, and you almost are a little uncomfortable. And then there's this incredible like joke payoff at the end of it that is even funnier because you haven't been laughing for a little bit. I feel like, is it Islington?
Yeah.
He did a really good job with that, kind of like tiring you out slightly and then just this big payoff with the action. Yeah. I think the next one comes out early 2025, right?
Yeah, he does a good job putting out updates.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Does he on his site or Instagram or?
I believe his site.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I like authors that do that, the like weekly, monthly updates.
Oh, I agree.
I guess that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll definitely do that.
For sure. And now I'm reading something completely different, which is Musashi. Have you read it?
No.
Yeah.
It sounds different already.
Yeah. It's like the classic epic Japanese novel.
Sweet.
About Miyamoto Musashi, like the most famous like samurai in Japanese folklore.
So is it fiction, nonfiction?
It's fiction loosely based on the events of his life.
Okay.
But
so he's a real person.
He's a real person. Yeah, he existed. He actually wrote a very famous work of philosophy called The Book of Five Rings, which is quite good. But then he was just like a very famous samurai, sword fighter, philosopher, monk. Badass. Yeah. And the book follows him in sort of his early years, his like rise to becoming this epic samurai. But it's a tome. It's like 1,000 pages. It's a lot, but it's really good. And again, it's really different because just for one, the cultural differences of a Japanese book written in the 1800s, pacing is going to be different. Dialogue is going to be different. The way things are described is going to be different, but also familiar, and it carries you along surprisingly well. I think the stereotype is going to be that an older, bigger book like that is going to be very slow and hard to get through, like a Russian lit, but it moves at a pretty good clip. It's very entertaining. So I'm enjoying that now.
Nice.
Yeah. What else? Okay, we did learned recently. We did reading. What are we going to do on the next episode?
I think we should dive into either your crypto confidential experience, maybe at the start of it.
Yeah.
Getting the agent, getting the book deal, what all that looks like.
It's a good idea.
For nonfiction. I think that's one.
Yeah.
And I think we can go into the fiction side next for me, what that whole query process looked like, what I'm doing differently this time around to, fingers crossed, have some success. And I think those are two pretty compelling topics.
I love that. The timing works out perfectly too, because I figure you'll be getting into it about when we record that. If we do Crypto Confidential, getting the book deal next week, and then do getting a fiction book deal the week after.
Yeah. Or failing to get a fiction book deal, and what we're going to do differently to try to get the fiction book deal.
It's going to be great, like having this recording, and then you come back in, however many episodes after with the deal, and then we can talk about that.
Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I think that'll be really good. So if y'all want more, definitely subscribe. I think we'll have this will be on YouTube, obviously, and then in podcast players.
I don't even know where you put podcasts.
Yeah. YouTube is like the main thing now. And I think that's why it's worth doing this nice video production. So we'll definitely have this. It'll be on YouTube, because we haven't decided the name yet, but we'll announce it in our newsletters and whatnot. If you're watching this, then you know a name for it at least. So definitely subscribe to get future ones. I'm still most active on Twitter, probably. Is that where you are too?
Or LinkedIn Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm definitely writing less online now, which is nice. But
we'll talk about that in an episode too, right? It's like the brain drain of writing online versus writing for books.
Yeah,
it's definitely real.
Yeah, Twitter's probably the best spot though for both of us.
So is it at Nathan Baugh?
27.
27.
Yeah.
Why 27?
Favorite number.
Nice. I like it. Yeah. And I'm just at Nat Eliason. And then your newsletter it's still World Builders, right?
Worldbuilders.ai. Got the .ai extension before AI blew up. Now I'm regretting that. But I did purchase my domain name. So at some point it'll transfer.
And we'll definitely do some episodes on writing with AI too.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, one, that's become such a contentious topic, especially in the fiction world. And we're both pretty pro using it strategically to make yourself better.
Yes.
Not letting it do the work for you.
I agree. I don't think it's very good at drafting, at giving feedback as an idea kind of sparring partner. Pretty helpful.
Yeah, super helpful. And honestly, 2/3 of the time, how I find it helpful is I ask it to rewrite something. It gives me something and I go, oh, that's shit. But it gives me this idea to do it this other way that's good, right? It's like, that's really helpful. So
absolutely,
we'll definitely talk about that too. And I'm blog.nateliason.com or just on Substack, Nat Eliason. And reach out, say hi if you enjoy this. If you have anything in particular you want us to talk about, let's say leave a comment on YouTube mentioning that.
Yeah,
because that would be really helpful to hear.
Shoot us a DM on Twitter.
Yeah.
Either way.
And I mean, we've got so many episode ideas to cover here, so we're not going to run out of topics anytime soon, but it'll definitely help us prioritize things. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Adios.